Welcome to another episode of Cryptocurrent. Your host here, Richard Carthon. And today I got a special guest all the way out in Denver, Colorado, working on a really cool project called Constellation. We got Benjamin. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Richard. I appreciate you having me on, buddy.
Of course, man. Well, excited to learn more about Constellation. But before we dive into that, I want to learn more about you. Give us some background about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been in tech now for over 20 years. And in the last 10 years, I've been really focused in kind of the enterprise big data world, a lot of analytics stuff. And prior to co-founding Constellation 3 years ago, I worked at Oracle. And the reason I went to Oracle is because in my software world, I wanted to get a chance to feel what it was like to have kind of like the West Point of software laden in red tape, see if I could actually create impact. And I learned a ton. It was a really great experience. But then out of that, I met my co-founder, Ben Jorgensen, through Oracle. And he was like, buddy, you got to get involved in blockchain. I had this real interest in what was called adaptive intelligence at Oracle. And so I was pitching Ben on all these ideas. And he was like, dude, you got to get into blockchain. So I'm currently based in Denver, Colorado. And my role at Constellation is business development. So I focus on all like the engagements around enterprise, partnerships, academia, and so forth.
Nice. Well, it's cool that, your origin started at Oracle, getting more into the tech side of things. And then your co-founder is like, hey, look into this blockchain. So just let's stay there for a second. Like, around what timeline was that when you first learned about blockchain? And then once you started looking into it, at what point were you like, okay, I need to go all in on this, or I need to like find a way to make this like my full-time thing?
Yeah, so it kind of harkens back. Back in 2012, I saw this Gawker article about the Silk Road, about how you could buy drugs on the deep web. And that was when I discovered Bitcoin. And I was like, wait a minute, what is this Bitcoin stuff? So I had a really close buddy, Ian Mitchell, that introduced me to it all. And he's like, dude, you got to start buying Bitcoin. So I started buying Bitcoin at like $5 a coin. And at that time, of course, I didn't know that crypto was going to be what it was. It was just more of a means to do shady stuff, right? And so I at one point, my wife and I, we had a tax bill, and it came out of nowhere. It was a huge one. We're like, God, where do we have some liquid? She's like, oh, I've got all this Bitcoin sitting around. So we sold it. In hindsight. It's like one of those things where that was probably a multi-million-dollar tax bill, but c'est la vie. The type of guy I am is, I wouldn't say I'm a humanitarian, but I really am passionate about lifting people up and trying to balance the playing field. And in my years of being in data, in big data and analytics, I became very aware that a lot of these institutions that have been propped up in the digital age are working rather hard to mine data out of people. And I wouldn't say necessarily use it against them, but definitely capitalize on it and cut them out of that kind of, I guess, exchange, if you will. And I started working on this project called White Magic, which was really around surfacing data around the practices of institutions so that users could have insights in the moment as if they were to walk into, say, a restaurant that doesn't meet their grade of how they handle their food and whatnot. I knew that data was out there and that there was ways to surface these insights in the moment in a very meaningful way to the users based off their preferences. So I was sharing this with Ben Jorgensen at dinner one night, and he was like, bro, you need to get into blockchain. And I was like, and this was back in like 2017. And I was like, nah, that's some San Francisco stuff. Everybody's a star of their own movie with that. And I just, that's not for me. But, he convinced me to jump in, and he told me, it's kind of like taking the red pill. Once you see the world through decentralization, you can't see it another way. And it has. I some days I wish blockchain didn't exist because I'm constantly going through a mourning process of letting the old world die as I start to see the new ways that this is going to impact humanity.
Yeah. And honestly, I want to spend some time there before we dive into the next subject, because I feel like a lot of people who listen to our show, whether they're the newbie or they're a crypto OG or blockchain OG, that once you've gotten in this space and you get it, you can't unsee it. You can't, like, your thought process and how you even go about your day-to-day life changes. And I think sometimes it can feel like there's so much knowledge in so many different directions that you can go that it's constantly like drinking through a water hose. You don't even know like where to start. You're just like, I just have a cup. I'm not trying to, pull out a whole pan right now. But it does open your mind to more possibilities that you wouldn't think otherwise. And also, when you're trying to explain this to somebody who isn't necessarily in it yet, they think, oh, you've drinking the crypto Kool-Aid, and we got another crypto guy over here, you know what I mean? And or a blockchain person over here, right? And I think it's just really unique how much your mindset really shifts once you're opened to the possibility of blockchain and crypto.
Totally agree, man. Yeah. And that's what I've been really trying to educate people, is that it's a mind shift. It's not a technology. It's not money. It's not finance. Sure, it's a little bit of all of those, but the real big thing is that it's a shift in your mindset. You touched on that. It's kind of looking at the world a different way. So yeah, and that's been great in a lot of ways. And like I said, in other ways, it's been a little bit of a challenge. And when I came on with Constellation and this team, I said, look, I'm not in the business of vaporware. I'm not in the business of pump and dump schemes. I don't want to do any of that. I want to see if there is a real solution here that can impact people in the way that all the vision is saying it could. You hear all these promises, all this hype, and I just felt like a steward to just really see if there was a there,
Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. And then, of course, you coming from a background in security and data and everything else, you then start Constellation. And, when you first come on the website, one of the great things it says is the cybersecurity for big data. And the earlier thing that you're alluding to is basically how a lot of Web 2.0 in the browsers that you go to, you're constantly being followed. I remember, or I can't remember the article or video that I watched that basically says like, yeah, the internet is free, but if you look at the cost of your privacy, it's roughly around like $11 or something like that, which is insanely cheap for how low you sell yourself and like the value of your privacy. So can you kind of just speak to like, what was the intent behind creating Constellation?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to work with my co-founder Wyatt, who is the chief architect. Here you have this guy who created a math equation or a theory and then proved it by building a decentralized public network. And it's pretty amazing to work with those types of folks. And thank God. It would be one thing if we went out on this and this technology actually didn't work, which a lot of our, I would say, competitors or colleagues, however you want to position them, are dealing with. And so when we came in, we looked at like, hey, what are the limitations of Hyperledger and Ethereum from a transactional throughput? And a directed acyclic graph was the appropriate approach. We were largely inspired by IOTA and some of the things that they were struggling with. And we thought, hey, we're going to fix this. And that was more of the technology side. Hey, that's the opportunity. That's where we wanted to really build something that was easy to deploy, worked with existing data management tools, where a lot of these rich economies would be built into the protocol, allowing people to really focus on developing new businesses in this new paradigm. There's that side. And then there's the other side, which our tagline is honest data for a connected future. This team is really, for lack of a better term, we're hell-bent on honesty, and I try to educate people on the real promise of blockchain, which is immutability. And I'm always like, it's like Medusa looking at a database and that thing turns into stone the moment it gets committed. And if you want to change it, you can't. You got to, Medusa's got to look at the next thing and add another block to this thing. And of course, a directed acyclic graph isn't a traditional blockchain, but it's still an immutable ledger. And when you start thinking about that immutable data, like my brain goes to things like deepfakes, voter fraud, tax resolution. There's all sorts of really great things that, honestly, prior to blockchain, I thought we were screwed. Like how the heck are we going to get ahead of this corruption? Naturally, we are a business, so we are going after use cases that require big data validation and security from a streaming perspective. But our end goal is not only to just like help give people a new platform of choice to build on this new internet, if you will, but also the promise of, hey, there's a better way and there's actually something out there that can fight for truth when it comes to data. So that's really the core of our passion behind this project.
Truth behind data. I love it. One of the greatest things about blockchain is the transparency that goes with it. Of course, that can be a double-edged sword as well. However, at its core, I believe transparency is a good thing, and it is inherently good as you look at what we're trying to build towards the future. Instead of a lot of things being behind closed doors, you have to like take things at wink, wink, nudge, nudge value and people's word, and now you really can just see, are people doing and are businesses performing the way that they say that they are? And also being able to do everything in a transparently secure way as well. So, what are the types of either businesses or ideal people who would come and utilize Constellation?
Yeah, I mean, our flex is around scalability. And I think that a lot of projects are trying to boast like, hey, we can, beat some of these limitations we're seeing with existing solutions. And that's fine. We don't see ourselves as really trying to compete in this market. I'm rooting for everyone because the pie is so big. And, kind of like Hyperledger say blockchain is a team sport. I believe that decentralization forces collaboration. I really like that. So, as far as us being a scalable solution, we went after really the big data space. And a lot of folks, and God bless them, went after supply chain management, IoT, a lot of these things. And while we can kind of affect those different industries, we wanted to go after the biggest data creators in the world to flex and show that, hey, a graph-based ledger can actually manage copious amounts of data, which is kind of a holy grail. If you think about bulk data collection, it requires validation, and that's expensive. That's CPU processing. That means it has to travel on different 4 or 5G networks. And so here comes along this really cool ledger that governs distributed computing in a way that you can do edge computing to open up use cases that people have never even thought of before. And so one of our claim to fame that we're really proud of is that we were one of the very first companies to secure a working contract with the DoD. And we're working with a group called US Transcom. Folks don't know this, but they're the largest data creator in the world. And so it gives us a chance to show that, hey, you can actually create a consensus algorithm around a privatized network that's handling crazy amounts of data. And when we went to them, we thought, oh, we're going to help you with mesh networks and AI algorithms that require automation, all this kind of really grandiose stuff, which, don't get me wrong, really matters. But they're like, hey, look, if we can just cryptographically secure some complex data, it's like if we have a streaming data set and in there's a row and a column that has something that is like top secret, we need to mask that. And so that requires us to like pull it down and do some stuff. And it has to be passed over these compliant networks. But if you guys can help us hit that compliance level and a streaming capacity where this stuff then can be passed over public networks like the internet, it opens up so many different use cases for them to really orchestrate some new meaningful, data endeavors, if you will.
For sure. And something I want to go back really briefly on, DoD, if I'm not mistaken, is Department of Data. Department of Data for the United States.
Department of Defense. So it's the largest, Department of Defense, the largest agency within the U.S. government.
And what's great about that, I mean, the importance of keeping us, especially cybersecurity these days, because the U.S. government's been getting hacked lately, and also like that's a whole other can of worms. And it's cool that you are getting to work with the Department of Defense and try to address some of those issues. So I guess one of my questions is, why is blockchain a better solution than what we currently have, or what they're currently using?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. The internet's broken. It's broken. Like, there's a reason Amazon.com still goes down. There's a reason Marriott got hacked. The government gets hacked. Voter fraud. All this stuff is because all this power resides in the application layer that sits on top of this really thin protocol called HTTP, right? And so you think about, I always akin it to like them pouring a single story foundation for like a residential house. And then you put like Amazon with all these stacked services like IMDb and Twitch and whatever else is like a skyscraper that's sitting in its, so it's like, if you were able to take one of those floors down, the whole thing becomes unstable because it's using this really thin protocol. And so that leaves all the rules of engagement up to the entity. So that's why every time somebody accesses a website or anything, it's like, hey, partner, we've got our own way of doing things. Make sure you click this. We got to keep the cops off us, but we also are doing all sorts of stuff using legal speak that you have no idea what we're up to. And it's just so, and the name of the game is bulk data collection right now. It's like, they talk about how 90% of the world's data has been created in the last few years. That's an IBM marketing thing from like 2017, whatever. And what I love about that is it's not necessarily that much data is being created, but that much data is being collected. We now have like microphones everywhere. You say something, next thing you're getting an ad and you have no idea how they found out. And it's because data collection has become so ubiquitous but that's expensive and it's shady and it's a lot to manage. And just because the US government has access to cutting edge tools, they're still using these same protocols. They developed the internet with CERN, so like they know that these things are rough. So this is why these systems aren't working. They just can't scale. And where we're operating as a society is not going to slow down by any means.
For sure. And I mean, thanks for breaking that down of basically where, Web 2.0 was, where Web 0.30 is going, and like how that's going to help with the scalability and from a secure standpoint. And I guess a follow-up question to that is, although this would help the Department of Defense from a scalability and secure issue, or security issue, for companies or people who are looking into big data and want to be able to utilize blockchain or Constellation to do that, what are some ways that people would be able to interact with Constellation? Is it like open source, or is it that you go and do like one-on-one contracting with people? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, and we're really excited. So we're about to push out a new website here in the next like 3 or 4 weeks. And we've really kind of nailed down the productization of our network, because we have Hypergraph, which is essentially our base layer protocol. And then we have this toolkit that we're bolting on top of it, and we're calling it Hypercube. And this is the first time I've mentioned it, so this will be an Easter egg for any of the community that's watching. And Hypercube, which is a tesseract model, if you want to get into the math or whatnot, the idea is it's blockchain in a box, okay? End to end. From the moment somebody comes in to the moment they're either listed or deployed network, we handle every kind of step of the way from a white glove treatment, not so much from a services or consulting perspective, but more of just the utility of tools, giving people tools. I believe people will be free if they just have the tools. I mean, look at TikTok. People are doing crazy stuff. And so we have this solution that allows people to build and deploy their own blockchain networks, mint their own cryptocurrencies, NFT, stablecoin, all that, as well as decentralized applications. And so we kind of akin it to like WordPress, where, a mommy blogger uses WordPress, but so does CNN, right? And developers can get into the API documentation and hack it and do whatever they want. In this case, we are taking a white labeled version of this, an instance. And with, like, say, the government, we put it on a subnet, and it lives in a thing called GovCloud. And now they have their own terminal, licensed terminal to use, so that they can build out their own microservices and their own token economy if they wish. And we can talk a little bit about ways that the government could use crypto, but so that's how we're going to market with folks. We want to get out of our own way because we are such an open platform for so many industries. It's not really in our best interest to go deep and be like, oh, we only work with medical customers. We have to be an open playbook to allow people to grab this tool and do what they want with it.
For sure. And since you posed the question, let's go down that rabbit hole. How could governments use crypto using your blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of a stretch, meaning that this is in theory, not in practice. But we've talked to the IRS, we've talked to the Customs Border Patrol, we've talked to the DHS, and most recently, I was asked by the DoD to talk about NFTs, because there's all this hype around NFTs. When the DoD is sending me Rolling Stones articles about Kings of Leon album, they're like, what is this? And they got really excited when I started talking about this thing I call edge procurement at the edge. A lot of folks don't understand that procurement is what kills almost everything. Like, people's lives are lost all the time because of procurement. And if you think about an institution such as one of these domains working, or a federal agency, they could have an NFT, and that NFT could represent a book of value of the licenses that they can give out in moments that mission bids come in. Say there's a mission bid come in, they parse off and basically loan out a piece of that NFT as a license. And once the mission bid is satiated, it gets returned, and then they get paid out and they get debriefed. So it allows for a lot more flexibility versus the old way, which is, hey, why don't you print off that PDF, get 15 people to sign it, and do all these things, when why can't we just build that entire model directly into the cryptocurrency, allowing for automation and the handling of different activities. Another quick example is if you think about the licensing of software and simulation, like somebody develops a really cool augmented reality thing that they use in combat training. Well, right now the procurement is like, all right, we're going to license this thing for this many uses. We're going to put it out there and try to track who's going to use it when. Before they go into the simulation, we'll make sure that they have the right clearance for the contract. all that stuff can be handled within the cryptocurrency and normalize that. Say somebody's in the simulation and they use AR for a specific need in that moment, they only dole out a micropayments or they only micro license it, in the moment. So there's all these really cool pockets that that are untapped, if you will, in the DoD in many different areas around cryptocurrencies.
Right. And I mean, something that you're exposing right now is two big things that I'm taking away. One, that government is seriously considering blockchain technology and even the thought of utilizing crypto. But then two, because there's so many different use cases within it, that eventually they probably are going to have to adopt or die. Because not only just here in the US, but internationally, it appears that a lot of governments are embracing blockchain and trying to figure out how they can be at the forefront and the cutting edge of it. I do know that it, like even out in China, they have there's CBDC, centralized banking, digitalized currencies. They're also trying to find ways to use blockchain so they can start tracking things within their own citizens and whatnot. So it's interesting to see how governments are really starting to embrace blockchain.
Yeah, it's far out, man. But I mean, this gets into the conspiracy world that there's factions. There's people in these groups that don't want this to be absorbed because working in the shade is much easier. It's like giving a landlord a tool that can have full transparency with their tenants. They're like, well, I kind of don't necessarily want that because I can work in the shade and it's my word against theirs and I'm a landlord. So anyway, so that makes it a little bit trickier, but I don't feel like it's kind of a nice to have. These governments have no other choice but to look at this technology because, as I stated before, the existing systems are just not going to work moving forward.
Right. So as we look, if you could look into the next decade, where do you see blockchain technology growing and going?
Oh, yeah. And my team is tired of hearing me say, all my friends are, I say this all the time. The future is microservices. The future is micropayments. The future is microinvestments. That's the beauty of all of this is breaking things up from these broad institutions. We always talk about central banks and central authorities, and that's fine, but I use the use case of mobility, which we're a big player in the mobility space, is around how you have these cars that need to autonomously communicate to each other, right? And so people are like, why do autonomous cars not exist? It certainly isn't because we don't have the technology. I mean, the technology's there, but there's a whole myriad of trust issues. People are like, oh, right, who owns the network? Is it Toyota? Is it Google? And the answer is no one, right? And so all of a sudden, now that you have distributed ledger allowing these cars to communicate and pass IP, and it still is to the owner, and maybe even they create an economy where they get paid for that IP and how it's being used, it opens up the ability for these sensors to machine communicate and also transact value that may be locked in the ecosystem or the network that may not be transferable or liquid to fiat. But it conducts a value exchange that is really an edge network. And that then opens up crazy possibilities. But for the individual, I think now is a huge play for the underdog because these massive institutions can't move very quickly to buy this crypto. It's too volatile. They're regulated. They can't touch it. Whereas, us folks at home with the terminal can get on and put $50 into Bitcoin, put $50 into some altcoins. And now I have people that are starting to stake their investments and doing, these, APY programs and getting money back and becoming, lenders. And these are things that the common man would not be able to do from an investment strategy. Because if you want to invest in commercial real estate, you have to be an accredited investor. Well, no longer. You can buy $1,000 block of a building using crypto and you get paid out based off the dividend. You get dividends paid out based off of the performance of that building. So microservices, micropayments, and microinvestments are the reason why every individual on this planet should get excited about this technology.
For sure. Everyone go back and listen to that again. I think those were a ton of great gems and nuggets to take out. I think that, as you said, instead of it being a lot of different services and different operations that have to happen to make this essentially one small thing happen, we start getting these microservices done so that things can happen faster and with a lot less friction and in a decentralized way. We start solving a lot of scalability issues and ease of use, and we start picking up on adaptability. And so I think that is going to be crucial, as well as how can it start being adapted by the greater world. But thank you so much for those nuggets. Another little fun question I want to ask is, if you could take all the knowledge that you have right now and then pour it into yourself back when your friend first convinced you, hey, blockchain is the move, what are some of the things that you would go and teach and tell yourself?
It was crazy in 2018. There was a lot of money, a lot of hype. And at the time I was a little timid, because I was traditional. It was all these people talking about things I'd never heard of before. And so I wouldn't say insecure, but I was trying to be a little bit more humble and just be like, okay, maybe they know something I don't. And I should have trusted myself a little bit more that they don't know anything that I don't. In fact, there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of promises made in 2018 that really hurt the industry. IBM putting out that stupid forklift commercial in like 2016 saying we are blockchain. That really, and I don't know if you read recently, they've laid off 70% of their DLT staff. And it's because they don't have anything, and a lot of people didn't have anything. And so there was all this money that was pumped into it. And so I just would have told myself to like stay very tight to my core intuition that, hey, keep focused on what you care about and put the blinders on a lot of this stuff, because it really did emotionally affect all of us. These swings, all these crazy dumps, the SEC suing, EOS or whatever, like these things just kind of make you a crazy person. And I realized they never served me and I could have blocked them all out from the get-go. So, but live and learn, right?
For sure. Great advice. And, as we kind of wrap this up, what is a final thought that you want to leave with all of our listeners here today?
I guess like those that are passionate about this, you have a responsibility. If you are called to this and you feel, like myself and Richard, really passionate about crypto and blockchain, teach people, sit people down and educate them on how to set up a wallet, how to transfer currency, give them currency, start to really make this a sticky situation for people that don't know what they're doing, because right now is a power play. And I really do believe that we're going to be in this window that once what I call the normies, the people that think this is all stupid until it gets to a kind of a terminal velocity. Once they get in, we're not going to get as many opportunities as we're seeing right now. So teach others if you're excited. And the last message is, if you're an opportunistic, pound sand. I'm so tired of the gold rush. People are like, oh, well, I can start a mining farm because I got energy and I can do this, or I'm going to, I'm just so tired of the opportunistic people coming in trying to squeeze money out of this, because there's something so much more beautiful underneath it all that is really important for humanity. So, whatever. I'm really passionate about it. I just think that these opportunistic people are but they exist in every industry. I mean, look at the cannabis industry. It was like a gold rush and now it's just saturated, right? So that's my advice.
For sure. So people are definitely going to always, follow the opportunities, but as been just clearly laid out, share what you're passionate about, share what you're learning. There is a huge opportunity in this space. Keep educating yourself and go and take the actions, right? And some of the actions might even be just sharing what you've learned today with someone near you. If you have a friend that you stay with, or a loved one, or someone in family who's been talking about crypto or has any interest, make sure that you're sharing what you learned with them, because you might be able to plant the seed that helps them learn and decide that this is a route that I want to go, that ultimately changes their life. And it's crazy how small little seeds really can make waves with the impact that can come with a lot of people. So, Ben, thank you so much for sharing all that information, dropping that knowledge, sharing that passion with us. What are some ways that people can connect with you and learn more about Constellation?
You can just Google my name, Benjamin Diggles, and we're on Telegram. I'm very visible. Anybody who asks a question, I try to answer it. So yeah, ConstellationNetwork.io, track us there. You can find everything. But our Telegram community, very passionate. We call it # the best community in crypto, because these guys and gals are just super passionate. And they've been with us since the beginning. I mean, we at one point were just, a no-namer. And I wouldn't say everybody knows who we are right now, but we're certainly making our way up the ranks. And I really appreciate all the support from everybody.
100%. Well, you heard it here first. Again, Benjamin, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And of course, for everyone listening, stay cryptocurrent. Today's episode is brought to you by Constellation, cybersecurity for big data. Constellation allows you to implement security for complex data sets without changing existing IT infrastructure. It's secure, cost-effective, scalable, and easy to integrate. They also have the Stargazer Wallet, which is a cross-chain functional wallet for the future of cross-chain interoperability. For more information, go to constellationnetwork.io. Again, that's constellationnetwork.io.